There are usually many cries for help before you reach that moment when you realize something has to give and you know you need to get real help. I've reached that point twice. Welcome to Both Sides of Me, a channel dedicated to talking openly and honestly about bipolar and mental health. Thank you for joining me today. I'm glad you're here. I first realized I needed help after an episode I'd had at work. I was about 6 months into my first professional job, which was exciting. I was at the tail end of my training, and now my job was to review client accounts, find any errors, reconcile them, or flag for further review. We had a quota of how many accounts we had to review and resolve in a certain amount of time, and at times it could feel very daunting. On one specific day, I was sitting at my desk reviewing accounts of clients whose returns were out of balance. I'm sure I was feeling the pressure of it, but I can't recall there was anything out of the normal. In the middle of reviewing an account, I just froze, absolutely froze. I remember both hands were flat on the desk. I felt paralyzed and tears started streaming down my cheeks. I was overcome with this overwhelming feeling of despondency. My mind started racing and I was having thoughts like I wasn't good enough for this job, I shouldn't be there, this colleague or that colleague were better than me, they were more adept. I thought that my supervisors must be comparing me to them. I just knew they were hoping I would quit. Of course, none of that was true, but there was a lot of self-deprecating thoughts going through my head. I sat there for what seemed like forever, but it was only maybe 10 minutes, and I became increasingly aware that I was losing time, that I should be working on accounts. And I came out of it, calmed myself down, went to the restroom to get my composure, then went back to work, and very grateful that nobody witnessed that episode. However, that episode set the tone for the rest of the day and several days thereafter. Now, I knew that all the depression, anxiety, and irritability I had been feeling the last several years were not normal, and I needed real help from a specialist, but for some reason, I just never acted on it. Have any of you ever felt that way? I'd be interested to know if any of you ever felt that powerless. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And if you'd like to share, do so in the comments. Well, when I got home that day, I started looking up psychiatrists. In the days that followed, I eventually found one, and she specialized in bipolar. I met with her, discussed the most recent events in my life, and she diagnosed me as having bipolar, and we set out working on a treatment plan. It was trial and error for a while, which is normal, but I didn't feel like she quite met my needs. I didn't feel like there was a real compatibility. And so I went out in search of a new psychiatrist, and I found one, and he turned out to be a great fit. I just want to say, don't be afraid of changing therapists. If the connection isn't there or they're not a good fit for you, it's not about them. It's about you owning your health and being an advocate for yourself. Now again, it was trial and error, like I said, is normal, but we eventually found something that worked. And although I still had episodes, I didn't have any like the one I'd had at work that day, at least not for a while. In years that followed, I was doing okay, but my second manic episode was the scariest one. We had moved to another state, so I was no longer seeing a psychiatrist or even a therapist. My new general practitioner was monitoring my medication. Well, he was prescribing it, but there wasn't any real monitoring going on. I had started a new teaching position, and of course then it's 2020 school year, and 3/4 of the way into the year, the pandemic hit and shut everything down, including schools. Suddenly we were learning to teach online. This involved new learning management systems, creative lesson planning, and a lot of flexibility. All of this in less than 2 weeks. Because the next school year would also be virtual, instead of taking a vacation, I spent the summer learning new software application programs, creating virtual lesson plans from existing textbooks that were meant to be used in person, and learning new software applications like Google Classroom and whatnot. Now, when the school year started, I was teaching 28 third graders. Yes, 28, as well as teaching their parents how to navigate our software applications. It was interesting to say the least. My fellow teachers had all taught 15 plus years, so I was considered the baby of the team. I often felt inadequate by comparison, but I loved teaching. It's my passion. Our working hours were not the typical 8 to 3. We had evening classes and, of course, had to do lesson planning outside of class hours. And that took a lot of time. And needless to say, it was exhausting and very challenging. After months of little sleep, endless trials of patience, and the stresses of navigating through only my third year of teaching, it started to take a toll on my mental health. One particular day, I was feeling very agitated. I'd been experiencing extreme anxiety for a while, and this day it was out of control. By the end of the day, I was pacing, I had racing thoughts, and I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I was crying a lot. I had reached my breaking point again. I knew that it was time to get appropriate professional help. It took some time, though, but I was able to find a therapist and a psychiatrist. They were very supportive, great fit, and I'm still seeing them today. Now, you're probably thinking this is so depressing, and it is. But there's a moral to this story. There were signs. There are always signs. And out of pride and or a lack of awareness, I missed them. The other lesson is that mental illness such as bipolar is too big to bear alone. When I was doing my student teaching, a wise teacher gave me some great advice. She said to beg, borrow, and steal from your fellow teachers because teaching is too big of a job for any one person to do alone. I believe the same goes for mental health issues. Don't go at it alone. I'm still learning this. And I still try at times to bully my way through on my own, but I am cognizant of the fact that I need to be vigilant about signs or looking for signs that warn of a possible episode. Now, I've read this book twice called You've Got This by Margie Worrell, and there's this quote from the book that I'd like to share with you. It's an African proverb, and it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Now, Ms. Worrell notes that we should never underestimate the value of friendships in surviving difficult times. She goes on to say that authentic connections instill in us resilience that surpasses the sum of our individual parts. I'd like to leave you with a quote from her. And it states, we are our strongest when we connect from the deepest part of ourselves with the deepest part of others. My hope is that this channel will offer a safe place to do just that. So I hope you'll continue to join me on this journey. Consider subscribing and hitting the notification button to be notified when an episode airs. If this helps you in any way, or you can relate to it, any of it, please hit the thumbs up button. Until next time, remember, you matter and you have value. Goodbye.